Roma was late. Not the kind of late that gets you fired, but the kind that sits in your chest and won't leave, where every step feels like it's being watched, and every second reminds you that this matters more than it should. The lobby of Virelix Holdings was too polished for mistakes. Glass, steel, silence, the kind of place that didn't forgive nervous people. Roma stepped into the elevator just as the doors were about to close, exhaling like she'd outrun something she couldn't quite name. She pressed the button for the 18th floor and leaned back slightly, catching her reflection in the mirrored panel. There it was, the nerves. Not obvious, not messy, just there, sitting behind her eyes, tucked into the way her lips pressed together a second too long. She reached into her bag, pulled out her gloss, clear, simple, familiar, and fixed it quickly, pressed her lips once, twice. Better. Nervous, but controlled. She could work with controlled. The doors slid open again before they could fully seal. Someone stepped in. Roman noticed him the way you notice something out of place without meaning to. Tall, composed, the kind of quiet presence that didn't ask for attention but had it anyway. His suit was sharp in a way that didn't look new, it looked chosen, intentional. He glanced once at the panel, saw her floor already selected, said nothing, just stood beside her. The doors closed, and suddenly the space felt smaller. Roma kept her eyes forward, but the mirror didn't give her that option. She could see him clearly in the reflection, calm, still, unbothered by the silence, which made her want to break it. She always did this. When she was nervous, she talked. Her aunt used to say it like a warning. Roma, one day your mouth will walk you into something your feet can't walk you out of. First day, she said. The words came out smoother than she felt. He turned his head slightly. Is it? He asked. His voice was low, even, not curious, just present. Mine, she clarified quickly. First day here. I'm trying not to look like I don't know what I'm doing. A pause. Not awkward, just quiet. He gave a small nod. You don't. She smiled at that, just a little. Good, she said, because I absolutely do. Another pause. She could have stopped there. She didn't. You work here? She asked. Yes. That was it. Just yes. Roma let out a soft breath, shifting her wake slightly. What floor? 18. She blinked, then smiled again, this time a little brighter, a little more relaxed. Same, she said, so at least I won't be completely lost alone. He didn't respond. Not cold, just measured. And for some reason, that made her want to push just a little further. You know, she said, tilting her head slightly, voice lighter now, if my boss is even half as put together as you, I think I might survive this job. Silence. Then, a small shift in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close enough to notice. The elevator chimed. 18th floor. The doors opened. They stepped out together and then separated without another word. Roma walked toward reception, already pulling herself back into professional mode, already pushing the moment out of her head. Because that's what you do. You move on. You focus. You don't dwell on small, meaningless interactions in elevators, not when your entire future is sitting just a few steps ahead. She didn't think about him again. Not until 7 minutes later, when the room stood up and he walked in. The room stood before she understood why. Chairs shifted, conversations cut cleanly in half. Even the air seemed to tighten, as if the building itself had decided something important had just entered it. Roma followed the movement, her fingers still loosely holding the edge of the welcome packet she hadn't opened yet. And then she saw him. Not in a mirror this time, not as a reflection she could pretend wasn't real. Him, walking through the glass doors at the far end of the room with the same quiet, unhurried control he'd had in the elevator, the same measured pace, the same absence of effort. But now the room moved around him. People straightened, voices lowered, attention shifted, subtly but completely. Roma felt something drop in her chest. No, that wasn't... He slowed just slightly as he approached the front of the room, his gaze moving across the small group of new hires, not searching, not scanning, just noticing. And then his eyes found hers. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't long, but it was enough for recognition to settle between them like something real. Roma's stomach tightened. Her mind, unhelpfully, chose that exact moment to replay it. If my boss is even half as put together as you... She stopped breathing properly. Someone beside her shifted, murmuring something she didn't catch. The HR coordinator stepped forward, her tone suddenly sharper, more polished. "Good morning, sir." "Sir?" Roma's fingers tightened around the paper in her hand. He gave a small nod, acknowledging the greeting without breaking stride. Then he turned toward them fully. "Let's not make this formal," he said. His voice was exactly the same. That was the worst part. Same tone, same calm weight to it. No edge, no embarrassment, no sign that anything had happened at all. "As you were." The room hesitated, then slowly settled. Chairs lowered, shoulders relaxed, but not completely. Roma didn't move, couldn't. The HR coordinator cleared her throat. "We were just finishing orientation for the new intake." He nodded once, then stepped closer. Too close. Roma became very aware of everything all at once, the way her blazer suddenly felt too warm, the faint scent of polished wood and coffee in the air, the sound of her own pulse where it shouldn't be. The coordinator gestured slightly. "These are our new hires for compliance and strategy." He looked at the first person, then the second, and then Roma. "Nice to see you again," he said. The words were simple, neutral, professional, but they landed heavier than anything else in the room. Roma forced her hand to move when he extended his. It was steady. She would remember that later, how steady it was, despite everything happening inside her. "Roma," she said, her voice just short of betraying her. A pause. Not long, just long enough. "Kinso," he replied, "CEO." The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It settled. Roma felt it fully this time. Not a drop, not a flicker, a full, undeniable shift. The elevator, the conversation, every word, every tone, every unnecessary sentence, all of it rearranged itself instantly under one truth she couldn't undo. She had flirted with the CEO on her first day. Her grip loosened just slightly before she caught it again. He didn't react, didn't linger, didn't hold the moment longer than necessary. He moved on, spoke briefly to the others, asked 2 questions, gave 1 instruction. Normal, completely normal, as if nothing had happened. Roma stood there, still holding the same piece of paper, still facing forward, but no longer seeing anything in front of her. Her thoughts were loud now. Too loud. You should have stopped talking. Roma decided, before she even sat down at her desk, that she would become invisible. Not careless, not quiet in a way that looked like fear, just precise, contained, the kind of presence that did its work and left no trace behind. It was a good plan. It lasted until 2:17 p.m. "Ms. Roma?" She looked up. The man standing beside her desk was sharply dressed, expression neutral, posture exact. The kind of person who didn't deliver messages, he issued them. "Mr. Kinso needs the Q1 compliance summaries consolidated before close of business." Roma blinked once. "Me?" A slight pause. "You were assigned to compliance support." "Yes, but..." She stopped herself. Recalibrated. "Of course. I'll handle it." He gave a small nod and walked away. Roma turned back to her screen, the calm she had carefully constructed beginning to thin at the edges. There were at least 4 people in the section who had been here longer, people who knew the systems, the shortcuts, the structure of where things lived and how they were labeled. She had been here for 5 hours. This wasn't random. She pulled up the database anyway. Worked. Quietly. Carefully. She didn't ask too many questions, just enough to not look lost, just enough to keep moving. Documents. Dates. Reports. Cross-checks. At some point, she forgot to be nervous. At some point, the work became the only thing that existed. She compiled everything. Clean. Ordered. Indexed. She added a cover page without being asked. When she finally placed the file on the assistant's desk, it was 4:56. She didn't linger, didn't look toward the glass office, didn't think about him. She went home and told herself it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. Ms. Roma. The next morning. Different task. Different format. Same tone. By Wednesday, the pattern was impossible to ignore. She was called in to sit through a briefing she wasn't senior enough to attend, asked to take notes on a discussion she barely had context for, given a document to review that had no instructions attached, just expectation. Roma sat at her desk that afternoon, hands folded for a moment over her keyboard, thinking. There were 2 possibilities. 1, he was testing her. 2, he was making a point. Neither option made her comfortable. She adjusted her posture slightly, exhaled, and returned to her screen. Work was something she understood. Work made sense. People didn't. "Good morning, sir." She said it every day when he crossed the floor. Small, polite, controlled. Every time he paused. Just slightly. "Good morning." Nothing more. No indication, no acknowledgement of the elevator, no hint of anything beyond the surface. That should have made it easier. It didn't. Because if this was punishment, it was quiet. If it was attention, it was deliberate. And if it was something else, she didn't have a name for it. On Thursday afternoon, she found herself alone in one of the smaller meeting rooms, staring at a report she had been handed without explanation. No context. No direction, just trust. Or expectation. She wasn't sure which. Roma leaned back slightly in her chair, eyes scanning the figures again. There was something off. Not obvious, not loud, but there. She leaned forward, checked it again, and then she saw it. A small transposition in a regional figure, the kind of mistake that slipped through because it didn't look like one. She fixed it, didn't announce it, didn't flag it loudly, just corrected it, documented it, moved on. When she submitted the file, she didn't think about it again. She didn't think about him noticing. She didn't think about anything beyond the next task, because that was the only way this worked. Stay focused, stay invisible, stay careful. She told herself that was enough, that it had to be. But somewhere between the silence of the work and the weight of being watched without understanding why, Roma realized something she didn't want to admit. She wasn't just trying to disappear anymore. She was trying to prove something, and she didn't know to who or why. By Friday, the work had found its rhythm. Or maybe Roma had. She arrived earlier than she needed to, left later than she planned to, ate at her desk more often than not, something simple she brought from home, careful and measured in ways that had nothing to do with preference. The building felt different when you stopped trying to be seen in it. Quieter, sharper, more honest. Roma learned where things lived, not just in the system, but in the people. Who answered questions directly, who avoided them, who knew things without saying they did. She adjusted, listened more than she spoke, worked. It was during a routine review that she noticed it. A regional compliance summary, already approved, already passed through multiple hands. clean on the surface, structured the way it should be, but something didn't sit right. Not immediately, just enough to pause. Roma leaned forward slightly, scanning the figures again, slower this time, not looking for something wrong, just letting her eyes move without urgency. There, page 16, a number that matched, almost. She pulled up the source report, cross-referenced, checked the sequence. A transposition, small, easy to miss, the kind of mistake that wouldn't collapse anything immediately, but would echo later in ways no one could easily trace back. She sat with it for a moment. 3 senior analysts had already reviewed this, signed off on it, sent it forward. Roma corrected it, quietly. No announcement, no message, no interruption to anyone's day. She adjusted the figure, noted the change in the version history, and moved on to the next section like it had always been that way. Work didn't need witnesses, it just needed to be right. She forgot about it by the time she reached the last page, forgot about it when she submitted the file, forgot about it when she returned to her desk and opened the next document waiting for her. It was sometime after noon when she became aware of a shift. Not loud, not obvious, just presence. Roma looked up. Kin Sao stood at the edge of her desk, close enough to speak, not close enough to intrude. Her hands paused over the keyboard. "The regional summary," he said. She straightened slightly. "Yes, sir." A brief silence. Not uncomfortable, just measured. "You reviewed it?" "Yes." Another pause. Then, the Busan figure. Roma's eyes held steady. There was a transposition. "You corrected it?" "Yes." He studied her for a moment. Not long, but not casually either. 3 senior analysts signed off on that report, he said. None of them caught it. Roma didn't respond. There wasn't anything to say. The room around them continued as normal. Keyboards, low conversations, the distant hum of movement, but the space at her desk felt still, focused. "You didn't flag it," he added. "I corrected it," she said, "and documented it." Another pause. Slightly different this time. Something quieter beneath it. "Good." The word was simple, unadorned, but it didn't feel small. He gave a single nod and stepped back, already moving away before the moment could become anything else. Roma sat there for a second longer than necessary, her hands still hovering over the keyboard. Then she exhaled, softly, turned back to her screen, and kept working. But something had shifted. Not in the room, not in the tasks waiting for her, in the space between effort and recognition. She hadn't asked to be noticed, hadn't worked for it, but it had happened anyway, quietly, without spectacle, and for the first time since she stepped into the building, Roma didn't feel like she was trying to keep up. She felt steady, not safe, not yet, but certain, and that was something she hadn't expected. Not here, not like this, not from him. It didn't begin all at once. Roma noticed it the way you notice something shifting just out of reach. Small things, easy to dismiss if you weren't already paying attention. A conversation that stopped half a second too late when she walked past. A glance held just long enough to mean something. A space at the table that used to exist and didn't anymore. She told herself it was nothing. Work continued, tasks came in, deadlines moved forward the way they always did. But something around her had changed. By Tuesday, she knew. "People are talking." The voice came from her right. Roma turned slightly. Lorraine Sung, the quiet strategist who rarely spoke unless it mattered, was looking at her. Not unkindly, just directly. "About what?" Roma asked. A small pause. "About you." Roma waited. "The elevator," Lorraine said. "They think it wasn't an accident." Roma's fingers stilled over her keyboard. What do they think it was? Lorraine hesitated as if weighing how much to say. That you knew he'd be there, that you planned it, a beat, that you're positioning yourself. Roma let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That's not true. I know, Lorraine said quietly, but that's not the version being passed around. Roma nodded once, slow, controlled. That was the thing about rumors. They didn't need proof. They just needed structure and someone to build them. She didn't ask who started it. She already knew. Yura Minjun didn't speak loudly, didn't need to. Her influence moved differently, through suggestion, through implication, through the careful placement of doubt. Roma had seen it before, just not directed at her. She turned back to her screen, worked. That was what she could control. Not conversations, not perceptions, just output. But the shift continued. Lunch invitations stopped. Not abruptly, just gradually. The group that left at 12:30 still gathered. They just didn't look toward her desk anymore. Roma began bringing her food every day, eating quietly, working through the hour. It was easier that way, cleaner, contained. Until Wednesday afternoon. She was in the kitchenette waiting for the machine to finish pouring coffee when she heard it. The elevator footage. Her attention sharpened. They pulled it already. Of course they did. Roma didn't turn, didn't react, just listened. If she really did what they're saying, a soft laugh, bold. Roma stood very still. The machine beeped. Her coffee sat untouched for a second too long. Elevator footage. Her mind caught on it immediately, replayed it. The mirror, the gloss, the way she had leaned slightly, relaxed, unaware. The words, "If my boss is even half as put together as you." Her chest tightened. If there was footage, if he had seen it, if he had watched that moment alone in his office, replayed it with the same calm attention he gave everything else. Roma picked up the cup. Her hand was steady. She didn't spill, didn't rush. She walked back to her desk like nothing had changed, sat down, opened her screen, but the work didn't come as easily, not this time, because now there was something else layered over everything, not just the rumors, not just the isolation, exposure, the idea of being seen without control, of a moment that had belonged only to her, now existing somewhere else, stored, observed, interpreted. Her thoughts grew louder, sharper. You should have been more careful. You should have said less. You should have known. She stopped, forced her focus back to the document in front of her. Numbers, structure, order, things that made sense. She worked through the rest of the afternoon without looking up. Didn't greet anyone when they passed, didn't notice the glances, didn't acknowledge the silence, because acknowledging it would make it real, and she couldn't afford real. Not right now, not when everything felt like it was balancing on something she couldn't see. By the time she left that evening, the building felt different again, not colder, just aware. And for the first time since her first day, Roma wasn't thinking about the mistake she made in the elevator. She was thinking about who else might be watching it, and what they thought it meant. By the 11th day, Roma stopped pretending she didn't feel it. Not the rumors, not the silence. Him. It had shifted again, subtly, deliberately. He no longer called on her the way he had before. No unexpected tasks, no quiet requests that placed her just close enough to be noticed. Just distance, careful, measured, as if something had been adjusted. She told herself it was better. It was what she had wanted. Space, clarity, no attention. She worked, stayed late. That part hadn't changed. The building after hours was different. The lights dimmed just enough to soften the edges of everything. Conversations disappeared. What remained was the quiet rhythm of work and the distant hum of the city below. Roma sat at her desk, finishing a report she could have left for the morning. She didn't. She rarely did. The numbers made sense. They always did. People didn't. She heard the door open behind her. Not loud, just enough. She didn't turn immediately, kept typing, finished the line, saved the document, then looked up. Kin So was standing just outside his office, not moving toward the elevator, not leaving, just there. "You're still here," he said. Roma nodded slightly, finishing something. A pause. He stepped forward, but not all the way, stopping just within conversation distance, close enough to speak, far enough to remain deliberate. He looked past her toward the windows. The city stretched below in quiet light. "People behave differently around me here," he said. Roma didn't interrupt. "In meetings, they agree too quickly. In hallways, they move out of the way before I reach them." A small pause. "In elevators, they look at their phones." Roma felt that settle somewhere deeper than it should have. She hadn't looked at her phone. "You didn't," he said. Not a question, a statement. Roma held his gaze. "I didn't know who you were." "I know." Silence, but not empty. "Monday morning," he continued, his voice even, "was the first time someone spoke to me in that building like a person, not a position." Roma looked at him carefully. He wasn't looking at her the way others did, not measuring, not evaluating, just present. "I talked too much," she said quietly. A faint shift in his expression. "Most people don't talk at all." That almost sounded like approval. Almost. He stepped a little closer now, resting one hand lightly against the back of the chair across from her desk, not sitting, just grounding himself. "The report," he said, "the correction, the consolidation last week, the way you document your work." Roma blinked once. He had noticed that. All of it. "You skip lunch," he added. "You bring your own food. You arrive before 8. She didn't respond, didn't know how to. "You work like someone who can't afford to fail." That landed. Clean. Accurate. Unavoidable. Roma looked down briefly, then back up. "I can't." "I know." The words were quiet, certain. "I noticed," he said, "before you realized I was paying attention." Something in her chest shifted, not sharply, not suddenly, just enough to be felt. They stood there in the low light, the distance between them no longer defined by rank or structure, but something quieter, more human, more dangerous. "You matter here," he said. Not dramatic, not emphasized, just true. Roma didn't answer, because answering would mean accepting it, and she wasn't sure she knew how to do that yet. He straightened slightly, the moment easing back into something more controlled. "Go home. Finish it tomorrow." She nodded. He turned, heading back toward his office, and just before he stepped inside, he paused, not turning, not looking back, just enough to leave something behind. Roma sat there a second longer, then another, the screen in front of her still open, the work still waiting, but something had changed, not outside, inside, because for the first time since she walked into the building, she wasn't trying to prove anything. She had already been seen. The shift came quietly. So quietly that Roma almost missed it. Monday passed without her name being called. No unexpected assignments, no carefully placed tasks that pulled her just close enough to his orbit to feel it. Tuesday followed the same pattern. By Wednesday, it was no longer coincidence. She worked, focused, delivered everything on time, but the space where his attention used to be, measured, deliberate, was gone. Not replaced, just removed. She told herself it was better, cleaner, what she had wanted from the beginning. Distance. Still, she noticed. It was Lorray who said it, softly, like everything else she said. He submitted a transfer request. Roma looked up. For who? For you. The words didn't land immediately. To strategy, Lorray added, different reporting line. Roma's fingers stilled on the keyboard. He had denied her request and then done it himself. Not to move her away, to move himself out of it. She sat with that, for longer than she meant to, because it meant something. Not loud, not obvious, but precise. He had thought about it, considered it, solved it, not with conversation, with structure, with distance, with care. Her last day in compliance ended without ceremony. A few quiet goodbyes, a nod from Lorray, the same steady rhythm of work continuing around her as if nothing had shifted. But something had. Roma gathered her things at 5:42 p.m., her fingers brushing briefly over the edge of her desk before she turned toward the elevator. The doors opened almost immediately. She stepped in, pressed the button, exhaled. And then, footsteps. Measured. Familiar. He stepped in just before the doors closed. The same space, the same mirrored walls, the same quiet hum beneath everything. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Roma watched their reflection. Her posture, his stillness, the distance between them no longer defined by anything external. No title, no structure, just presence. You moved my department, she said. It wasn't a question. No, I moved yours, he replied calmly. She turned slightly, looked at him. Why? A pause. Not hesitation, consideration. You're not my employee anymore. Simple, direct, uncomplicated. The words settled between them. Different this time, because now there was space for something else to exist, without consequence, without interpretation, without risk. Roma held his gaze, steady, no rush to look away, no need to fill the silence. The elevator moved, floor numbers descending quietly. I wanted to ask you something, he said. Her expression shifted just slightly. What? Another pause. Then, if my colleague is as composed as you, he said, his voice carrying the same quiet control it always had, I might actually enjoy coming to work. Roma blinked. Once, then a small breath left her. That's a terrible line, she said. His expression shifted, not restrained this time, a real smile. Brief, but complete. I've had time to think about it. Clearly too much time. Possibly. The elevator slowed, not yet stopping, just enough to make the moment stretch. Dinner, he said. No build-up, no pressure, just the word. Tomorrow. Roma looked at him, really looked this time, not as a boss, not as a presence she had to navigate, but as a person who had stepped back so she could step forward if she wanted to. That was the difference. That was everything. She thought about the first day, the gloss, the nerves, the version of herself that filled silence because she didn't know what else to do, and the version of herself standing here now, steady, certain, seen. Yes, she said. The elevator doors opened, the world outside moved like it always did, unaware, unchanged. They stepped out, in opposite directions, like before. But this time, there was no mistake between them, only choice, and both of them had made it.